you're hearing my voice
Yes.
during start, I hope that the
Okay, you're
technical
recording.
aspect of this isn't, I hope that the audio video isn't a problem for this meeting. We'll do our best. I can't, right now I'm not seeing all participants. I'm not sure why. Bonnie, is there a way that I can view the participants?
Yes, so on the top right-hand side of your screen, when you kind of move your mouse around, you will see a view. You're going to want to click on it and you're going to pick gallery.
I'm not seeing the icon you're.
Huh, I still didn't come up. Huh.
Okay, and so if you move your mouse around on your screen on the right-hand side, you're not seeing a view, a little view button come up on the right-hand corner.
Well, it says full screen and exit full screen when I hit it, but the only face I get is my own.
Okay, so go ahead and exit full screen.
Okay, I did that.
Okay, now in the right, hopefully in the right-hand corner, you'll get a view. It says my view.
I don't see anything that says my view. I don't know where that's supposed to be.
Okay, let's see. Can I show you?
Top right-hand corner, you don't have a button that says view?
No, I do not. I don't know where, I mean, upper right-hand corner, I've got a screen here that shows the list of participants, 11 participants, 8 panelists, 3 attendees, and it shows the status of audio and video for each one. I don't see
You got the
anything
participant.
else.
So you're
I
on
can see
the,
Mitch right now. Well, I guess I see the person who's talking when they're talking. Maybe that's the story here. I don't know.
Oh, you're getting the speaker list, not the everybody. View.
yeah, unfortunately, you are in the speaker list. Let me share my screen real quick. Hopefully you'll be able to see this. So Tom, when you're on your screen in the top right-hand corner, you should see a little button up here that says view, and you're not getting that at all, right?
Right now, I'm getting one. You are viewing Bonnie Shell's screen view options.
Try that one.
Fit to window or original size. That's all I get there.
Well, you're definitely going to want to fit the window when we're doing any presentation. What will happen on your screen then is, for now, the speaker who's speaking will pop up on your screen. I can list out everybody who we have in the meeting at this moment if you would like. What else I could do for you? Because my screen changes when I'm sharing. Do you, let's see.
Now I've got a saved document. Okay, I'm back to Tom Smith. I'll start the meeting now officially. It is September 14th, 2021, 3:10 p.m. My name is Tom Smith. I'm the Pickens County Hearing Officer. We're here, according to my agenda, for 3 different matters, one of which I'm gathering is going to be continued. And does somebody want to fill me in on the update on the agenda and let me know about the first item and what's going on there?
The first one just will be
Suzanne?
continued. Yeah, sorry, Tom, Suzanne. The first one will be continued to October 19th.
And for the record, that's which one? The title of it?
Sorry, I got.
730 Rose Spur.
30 Rose Spur.
Yeah, and we don't even need to open the hearing and continue it because we're doing the public notice for the October 19th date.
Oh, okay, so there isn't any reason to, all right, to go through that exercise, that's fine. All right, we'll take these applications in order. The first one is Juniper Family Investments LLC. Standard procedure is for staff to make a presentation and the applicant to make a presentation. If there are any members of the public present who want to comment, you may do so at that time. If I have questions, I'll ask either as we go along or at the end of your prepared comments, whichever seems most appropriate. And of course, any of the other representatives of the applicants who want to speak may do so in coordination with your primary representative. As you, for both staff and the applicants, you can assume I've read everything because I have, and I've studied both these applications in detail, in particular Juniper Family Investments LLC. And I have a few issues on that one that mostly involve the relationship of this application, if approved, to past approvals and what may continue in effect and what may not. And we can get into that at the end of it. Let's initially deal with the merits of the application. And I guess we'll start with you, Tammy.
All right, thanks, Tom. So I guess I'll just start by saying that at this point, we haven't received any additional referral comments. We did get one comment from the fire department, and those comments were included in the packet. And the applicant has appropriately addressed that comment that they put in another pullout. And I did just receive about 10 minutes ago a email from Katie Link, who lives in the area with concerns. So I can touch on that, but I believe she's also in the meeting.
Yes, she is.
Okay. So maybe I'll just let her, if she's comfortable, talking about those comments, so I don't have to read that email that came in.
That's fine.
I'm done. Just giving a real quick recap, since Tom, you have read the memo. I don't want to go over the same thing again, but I guess I'll just basically summarize and say that staff believes that the applicant has appropriately placed the activity envelope, the new activity envelope, and the new home outside of steep slopes. It's not within the floodplain. They've placed it outside of the riparian setback. The major constraint on the property is a wildlife, and that would be the elk and mule deer severe winter range and concentration areas. And as included in the packet, they've hired Colorado Wildlife Sciences LLC and also worked with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. It looks to be that they've placed that activity envelope outside of those really constrained areas, which are the slopes above the ditch and the riparian habitat. And included in that hearing officer determination were additional wildlife conditions to mitigate impacts to the wildlife, which are consistent with our code and the wildlife standards. As far as the TDR, this parcel is located within the upper Snowmass Creek Caucus master plan area, which does allow for single family homes up to 15,000, although it encourages those homes to be 8,250. And so that's what this application has requested, is a house for 8,250. And as outlined in that memo, staff does believe that this For this house is consistent and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood, and is consistent with the special review criteria. So with that, we haven't changed the position that we recommend approval. And I can bring up for you, Tom, any exhibits you want in terms of drawings or those scenic exhibits or elevations or the new site plan with that pull out that they've amended. So with that, I'll just turn it back to you and let answer any of the questions you have or let the applicant present.
Okay, well, I don't have any questions at this point, although I will at the end, just to clarify the relationships of this approval with various other approvals that have preceded it. But at this stage, I'll turn it over to you, Alan, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Tom. It's nice to see everybody here this afternoon. For the record, I'm Alan Richman. I'm representing the applicant for this project, Juniper Family Investments. There are some members of the Juniper family here with us today. I just saw a text from Craig Slater, who is floating around out there in the ether somewhere. He's not showing up on the screen, but as I understand it, he can hear. And that's pretty great because apparently he had his hip replaced yesterday. So I'm impressed he's even involved at all. But Craig is the manager of the family investments. Megan is his daughter. Megan is on the call. And it is she and her husband and her children that would ultimately be living in this residence. So Megan is directly involved in this. And then you see Gary Moore also on the screen. Gary is Megan's father-in-law. Gary's a builder here in the Valley, and he's built many projects, and he would also be involved in this project. We've reviewed the staff memo. We appreciate the staff's review and particularly appreciate the recommendation of approval that Tammy just brought forward. We have reviewed the proposed determination. The applicants are comfortable with all of the conditions that are recommended in the staff proposed determination, and we don't have any changes whatsoever to the wording of any of the conditions in the proposed determination. So from our perspective, what the staff has brought forward to you as a recommendation is a very clean and straightforward approach to this application, and we're very, very comfortable with it. The Slater family has owned this property since 2009, and during this time, they've kept it as a productive hay meadow. Bonnie, can you possibly bring up 101 instead of 90? Could you bring up that aerial, the second one rather than the first one? Yeah, if you could bring up the other one, page 101. I kind of think this might tell the story better than anything else, if we can get that. Yeah, so this is an aerial that looks at the area, and you can see several things on it that I think probably help. You can see where the proposed house is. Tom, can you see that?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Just it's not crucial to the application, but it just helps me get oriented.
Yes.
As you know, Alan, I used to, like you, I used to drive that road every day for 30 years.
I still do.
Yeah, I know you do. I'm trying to picture where the entrance off Snowmass Creek Road is.
Yeah.
And so if you come down off Watson Divide, you turn right. Do you remember where Helen Dupire's old house was?
Yeah, I think I know which one you mean.
The little house that's on the left-hand side of the road as you shortly after you make the turn off of Watson Divide. And is the entrance to this property across
Well, this is on the right.
that or in that? Huh?
Yeah, this is on the right side, and it's probably about a half a mile from the turn at Watson Divide. It's a very quiet little entrance. There's a bridge that's been in place there for, oh gosh, I'm thinking back to when we were working on the neighboring property, and that bridge has been there for 30 plus years.
And you the bridge? You can see the bridge from the road?
Yes,
Yeah, okay. I think
Yeah,
I know where we're talking about.
and that's about all you can see. It's sort of a
Right.
steel, it's a steel structure, kind of a bridge,
Got it. Right.
that
And
pops
this
up
is
above.
above, so this is upstream of, that, what is it called, Snowmass Creek Ranch there?
I think
place,
so.
that old ranch house where
Oh,
that
no,
they
the
use for
Snowmass Creek
events and
Ranch is,
stuff?
yeah, Snowmass Creek Ranch is the very next one after.
Okay, I
So
got it.
Snowmass
Okay,
Creek
so I know
Ranch,
where we are.
Snowmass Creek Ranch is Lot
Right.
A of this subdivision, and this is Lot B of the subdivision.
Okay. All right,
Yeah, so if you see the little words, view there on the right-hand side, that's where the bridge is coming in.
okay,
And the proposed house is just up above that on the edge of the meadow. And what you're looking at there to the left of the house is the irrigated meadow. So as I was kind of starting in my introduction, the Slater family has owned this property since 2009. And since they've owned it, they've basically kept the property as a productive hay meadow. That green area that you're seeing there is the hay meadow. It's irrigated during the summer. And the only additions which have been made to the property, if you look at the far upper edge of the meadow, you can see a pond, you can see a blue kind of a blob. And right next to it, there is a 1,200 square foot agricultural equipment building that was built. Those were both added about 4 or 5 years ago. But other than that, the property has remained undeveloped. The envelope that's on the property today, if we can go back to the kind of the full view of the property, the envelope that's on the property today basically encompasses everything from the pond to about the end of the irrigated meadow. It covers the vast majority of the flat portion of the property, and most of that is the irrigated meadow. And that envelope was designated in 1980 on the original subdivision plat that was approved that separated lots A and B. When we started to evaluate where on this property within the envelope you might want to build a house, the primary objective of the family was to avoid putting it anywhere near the middle of that meadow, because if we put it anywhere within that meadow, we'd basically split the meadow in two, and we'd make it infeasible to continue to irrigate it and to keep it productive and beautiful. So we started looking at locations in the direction towards where you see the house is now proposed. But the envelope does not go that far today. The envelope basically stops at where you see the green area stopping. And we were testing locations within the existing envelope, and we found that every time we placed a house there, we had to bring a driveway across the meadow, and we had to locate the house within the meadow, and we were having significant impacts on the meadow. So I think really the most important decision that we made in preparing this application was the decision that we wanted to abandon the approved envelope and replace it with a new envelope in the general location where we have proposed it. Bonnie, if you could switch now to page 90. So this is the proposed site plan, and you can see that we've basically split the envelope into two pieces. On the upper left side is where the existing agricultural equipment barn and the existing pond are located. And so we've cut the envelope off there and just surrounded those two areas. Previously, that envelope would have continued across to the right and covered all of that area that you see as white. We are proposing to eliminate all of that portion of the envelope and replace it with the envelope that you're seeing now in the bottom right-hand corner of the property where the house would be located. And I really think it's the most important decision that we made for 3 reasons. First of all, by placing it in this location, you can see the proposed driveway It comes off of the Ranch Road. The Ranch Road is kind of um, the gray area that you're seeing there, coming up from Snowmass Creek Road, and coming into the property. And all we have to do is a very short extension, that's right. That extension that you're seeing is the gray that goes up towards the house. So we end up with a very short proposed driveway that does not impact the meadow at all. That's number one. Number two, by locating it here, we're basically placing the house in relative close proximity to the house on what is called the Chauncey parcel. You can see Chauncey labeled on this map to the right there. So the house, the Chauncey house, is just to the right of that. You could see it on the aerial photo. And that means that from a wildlife perspective, these two houses are considered to be clustered. You've got a wildlife report in the packet prepared by Jonathan Losky that was accepted by the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service. And it basically tells us that because of the proximity of those two houses, the zones of influence of the two houses will overlap. And so this new house will not cause any greater impacts on the wildlife than the existing house already does. And we're obviously trying to avoid that severe winter range for the deer and elk that we all know so well that sits up on Watson Divide. The Losky report also points out that the habitat really starts above the ditch, and the ditch is the line that you see up above the house. Yeah, that's the ditch there. And the habitat is all above that, and it is critical habitat, and it was important to keep the house below that ditch. So the second important point is the proximity of this house to the Chauncey house and the overlap in their zones of influence. And then the third thing that this location does is it puts it behind the cottonwoods and the evergreens and the healthy riparian vegetation that are located all along Snowmass Creek, that basically helps to filter views into this house. The house itself is about 575 feet from Snowmass Creek Road. So the visual impacts from this siting are really quite limited. And of course, this location is also several hundred feet above the floodplain of Snowmass Creek. So we're avoiding both the floodplain impacts and the riparian, or lands, I should say, and avoiding those sensitive features. So to sum this up, if you were to compare the recorded envelope to the proposed envelope, you'd see that they share certain basic features. They're both located well back from Snowmass Creek Road. They're both located well above the floodplain of Snowmass Creek, and they're both located below the ditch. So from those standpoints, the two envelopes are about equal. But the proposed envelope offers what I would consider to be two absolutely critical site planning benefits, which the existing envelope does not. First, it allows the proposed house to be clustered with the Chauncey house, which is a benefit to wildlife. And second, and most importantly to these owners, and I think to the Snowmass Creek Caucus, it ensures that the meadow can remain intact and productive. So we would hope that you would see the advantages of this proposed envelope, not really just to the private interests here, but much more so to the public interest and the community at large. Tammy's covered the issues with respect to the TDR. As she said, we think this is quite consistent with the caucus master plan, which would allow a house of 8250 and supports the use of TDRs. Another thing the caucus plan specifically says is growth should be consistent with the rural, equestrian, and agricultural character of the Snowmass Creek Valley. The applicants could not agree more. That's why they're trying to preserve this meadow. They believe in the agricultural and equestrian values of this area, and they want to preserve them on this property and keep this as an irrigated meadow. And of course, the caucus plan also supports projects which minimize their visual impacts and are compatible with the neighborhood, and we think that we're accomplishing that. If you look on page 32 of our application, you'll see a list of other sites where TDRs have been used in the Upper Snowmass Creek Caucus. There are quite a number of them, so this is certainly not plowing new ground in this caucus area. And we agree with staff that use of the TDR technique is accepted in this area and should be acceptable for this property. That's all I wanted to say. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And we would ask for your approval of this application consistent with the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Alan. Any other comment from anyone who's on the line here? Public comment or from other applicant representatives?
Mr.
If
Smith,
so,
Miss-
raise,
yeah.
I don't know if
Mr.
I have
Smith?
a raised hand.
yes, we have Miss Katie on the line.
Okay. Katie, identify yourself for the record and fire away.
I am currently by myself. However, I do represent my 6 siblings and we own the property together. We have been in the valley 30 plus years and clearly everyone's driven past the house a lot. Our biggest concern is, well, one question for you. Where is the greenhouse going? I don't see it on any of the maps located.
Yeah, that's a good point, Katie. You want me to answer that question?
That would be nice.
Yeah, sorry about that. We amended the application shortly after we submitted it to request a 360 square foot greenhouse. It basically goes behind the house, so you wouldn't see it from across the road at all. It sits behind the house. Tammy, I don't know if you have a copy of that drawing that you could put up so that Katie would be able to see that. I don't have the ability to share. my
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, let me share my screen here. Hold on.
Sorry about that, Katie. That's a really good question.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah, if you could zoom in a little.
Yeah. Why isn't it zooming?
I've got it. It's marked in red on this page.
Yeah, the zoom is delayed, but so here's the house where the cursor is.
Mm-hmm.
And that red rectangle right behind, I guess to the north, is where that 360 square foot greenhouse will be going.
So it's below the ditch and behind the house.
Okay. Well, that's definitely helpful to know where it is. Would anything else be going? I can't see it because it's so small and I can't enlarge it and talk to you simultaneously. The utility envelope, is anything going to be going in there?
Utility envelope is for the septic system. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what it's there for. It's just downhill of the house, so it allows for gravity flow. It obviously will be subgrade. You can see the existing well is in there, but no, there's nothing above grade that would go in that utility envelope.
Okay, that would be great. I guess some of our concerns are clearly, our view corridor and our privacy over across the way. I'm looking at, when the barn, quote unquote, barn went in and the pond went in,
Yes?
somehow 20 plus trees disappeared along the river. And it definitely impacted our riparian area on the river zone, and it concerned us. And the trees, they impact our view. I mean, we look directly at your barn now. And it's just, I guess our concern is that truly to be utilized as a barn, or is that actually a party house? Because that's what we've seen it more utilized from our property than anything else. And if that is the case, does it really necessitate another structure, greenhouse behind the house? I guess we're concerned about that. That's just some of our concerns. It also seems like the house is larger than some of the other houses in the area. And do you need a house that's that large? Just questioning that. It does seem much larger than most other houses in the area. We don't, we don't feel that a TDR should be transferred to this property as it will impact the density of the neighborhood, and it should remain in its original form. I'd like to request you do a survey now so that of the trees that are existing, and so that more are not taken down. We want these notes put into the conditions of approval so that we are on record. Because these are some of the things that do concern us.
Can Tammy or Alan, can one of you is there a photograph or a aerial that will show the location of Katie's property relative to the subject property for my benefit here?
Yeah, could she maybe describe where it's at? I'm not sure.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to. We're directly across from the barn. The down to the, if you see the pond, you got to go
This,
up. I can't even see it.
What's on the screen
Right.
is
Can we make the screen a little bit bigger? Is that possible?
there is
Yeah.
there's a better picture of the pond and the barn that Alan had up.
There we go. Now, keep going.
Tammy, it's the property directly to it's the property directly to the south.
oh,
So
okay.
it's like the triangular sort of shape. Yeah.
Yeah, that's us.
This guy? Okay.
Yeah, we're across from, I forget the name of the gal you were referring to when you were asking about the bridge. She used to babysit for us. It's the old blue house there. We're directly across the street there. We're directly across the street from Windstar.
Hold on, what I'm seeing here shows that you're on the
That's correct. Who's ever
same
heard?
side of
Yeah, we're
Snowmass
trying to-
Creek Road.
Yes, 2316 Snowmass Creek Road. We are directly, we are adjacent to the neighbors who
So
are Juniper
you're
Hill.
You're on the
Parcel A.
same side of you're on the same side of the road, but the opposite side of the creek, is that right?
Correct.
Right, right.
Okay.
That's parcel A of the subdivision.
And
Pardon me?
That's parcel A of the
Alan?
subdivision.
Oh, it's parcel A of the same subdivision.
Right.
Now I get it, okay.
Alan, do you want to answer the questions about the barn, and I can answer the riparian area and the trees and how that's being handled in the determination?
Well, I wonder if Megan or Gary wants to say anything about the current use of the ag building, because I've been in the agricultural equipment building, and it's for agricultural equipment.
Yeah, so this is Megan Slater. I can speak to that. Yeah, so the current use is for agricultural. I did have my wedding there 2 years ago, so I think that's probably a party that was referred to. And my cousin's wedding, it's definitely not any party venue at all. Just a beautiful property that I had my wedding at and my cousin had our wedding at, but it is for agricultural use.
I mean, it's basically where the equipment is being stored to be able to irrigate the property and to hay it.
Exactly, yep.
In terms of the trees that were removed, I don't have any knowledge of that. We did not propose removing trees as part of the application that was approved for the barn. And we're not proposing removing any trees as part of this application.
no, that's why we were so concerned initially, because we didn't anticipate it either. They
Yeah,
just all of a
understood.
sudden were disappearing.
Including on our side of the
Hold on.
creek.
Yeah, as well as, yeah. My sister just reminded me, they also, trees were cut down and dropped on our side of the property as well. Or not, on our property as well. So it was more to make it a view for the barn. So, which surprised us, that's all.
Yeah, I wish I'd had.
We didn't want to upset the neighbors, but it's just sort of, it concerns us because it's, you know, we operated on a basis of trust before, and now we, that was what became aware to us after the fact. So
So I guess, and to give you some information on our land use code. So when we call out the activity envelopes,
Uh-huh.
those activity envelopes, include areas where, activity can, essentially activity can occur. And so when we talk about that 100-foot riparian setback, there should be no development or activity, that 100 feet from the creek. There is some allowances for tree removal if someone obtains a tree removal permit for like a tree that's dangerous, that's poses a threat to someone's property or safety. And just if it's diseased or it's gonna spread more disease, there's allowances for tree removals, but they should have gotten a tree removal permit if trees were being removed. If that does happen, that is, technically a violation and should be reported. And we could red tag activity where there's tree removal happening without permits.
Yeah, I'm obviously having some difficulty in responding to this because it's the first I've heard of it. And normally we get some kind of notice before a meeting when an issue like this is going to arise. So I haven't had a chance to talk to my clients about this, and I don't know the facts here, but my suggestion would be if in fact trees were removed, and if they were, then they were clearly not authorized by part of this application, then it seems to me we have some mitigation that we need to do in terms of replanting there to reestablish for trees that were removed. I mean, if that's the case, and this is literally the first I've heard of this is 5 minutes ago.
Let me interrupt and just say that I appreciate the concern about it, and I don't want to minimize the issue, but it's an enforcement issue, and I can't really deal with that as part of this application today. So, anybody else want to comment before I start asking questions?
We do
And
have
the only other point I would make is we are not proposing the removal of any other trees. That's a condition and a representation that's been made here, and that's certainly part of the record. We're not proposing to remove any trees to develop this house.
Why is it we need it so big?
Pardon me? What was that comment? I didn't hear it.
no, I didn't. No, it just, we were just curious why, what,
Exemptions are supposed to be for a special reason. What is the special reason?
yeah,
Above and beyond everything else.
That I can't hear, so you'll have to
Okay.
translate.
Yeah, I'll translate for her. The exemption for the TDR is usually, we're just curious why they feel they need, why you feel you need to have the exemption. Is this for the greenhouse? I mean, for the extra TDR space, why it is that it has to be so much a bigger house? I'm curious.
Because that's what the zone district allows, and that's what the applicants are requesting, and that's what the master plan allows. The application is very clear as to the use of the floor area within the proposed residence, and that's what's being requested. We don't have to tell you anything beyond what's in the floor plan in terms of what's being proposed here, and the floor plan is very clear as to what's being proposed here. It's a house of 8,250 square feet.
Okay, anything further on this?
Tom,
Comment?
I do have two other people who have their hand raised. I'm gonna call on a Mr. Mark Polite. I'm asking him to unmute himself.
Yes,
Mark?
yes, can you hear me?
Mark,
Yes.
Mark Polite, okay. Mark, can you identify yourself for the record, where you live, and make your comments, please?
Yes, Mark Polite, 2316 Snowmass Creek Road, directly across the river from the activity zone and the barn of the proposed property that we're talking about. I'm Katie's brother, and I'm not sure why it is you need a fire pit down next to the barn when you're putting your massive 8,200 foot house way up at the other end of the meadow. I'd like for the fire pit to go up there. I'd like for less activity to occur down where the trees disappeared. And I'd like for all the activities to occur up at the main house envelope, the building envelope, which we actively negotiated the location thereof years ago.
Anything else, Mark?
Yeah, I also think justification for massive TDR increase is also warranted. And then I would like to like for you to require that a tree survey is done immediately so that no more trees are removed along the river.
Okay. Is that it for you?
For now, yes, thank you.
I also,
Okay. And so,
this
hold on.
is,
Let's deal with Mark's comments first. Alan, you want to comment on the fire pit location to start?
Megan, again, I'm gonna have to rely on you or Gary. I don't know anything about a fire pit.
I didn't see any reference to it in the documents I received, so I'm not sure if this is something that
mean, we're-
predates this application or what.
We're not
would-
proposing any changes up by the barn or the irrigation pond, so that
Well,
was approved 5 years ago. We're just not proposing anything there, and
I cannot view it, but on the prior site plan that was shown, a fire pit was shown next to the barn.
Well, you all have to realize that what I'm doing here is reviewing the request for new development on this property. And if there are issues associated with the prior approvals that were granted and compliance with the conditions of those approvals, then that's a potential enforcement issue
oh, I
for
see.
the county to consider. And you are certainly entitled to bring this to the attention, anything that you think is a violation to the attention of the county, and they'll investigate as they think appropriate. But I'm not an enforcement officer, so I can't really say. It looks like the fire pit is shown
Yeah, I see
on
it.
this
now.
page that I'm looking at as adjacent to the existing barn. And if that fire, so it's not something being requested now, and if it's not supposed to be there, then that's an enforcement issue for the county. Okay. The TDRs are, this program has been in effect in the county for quite a long time. Its purpose is to preserve backcountry lands and locate development in areas that are more suitable for development because they are in the vicinity of existing development. And there are, I know for a fact that, and it's also included in the application, that in the Snowmass Capitol Creek area, there are a fair number of properties that have utilized TDRs in the past, have been approved for the use of TDRs in compliance with that program. And so this is not an unusual application in that regard. I have not, typically the caucus would have commented on this application and the use of the TDR. Tammy, I'm not seeing any comments from the caucus. Can you fill me in on that?
Yeah, we didn't get any, receive any comments on this application. So yeah, we don't know what their position is on
So
this.
they were notified and they did not comment, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, the tree survey. Mark, you're talking about identifying the trees that are presently in place in the area of the proposed new development. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about every tree on the property because we lost some of our privacy previously when the trees magically disappeared. We don't want any more trees cut down along the river between our properties, period.
Okay, well, the applicant isn't requesting approval to remove any additional trees as far as I can see in this application. I'm not in a
So
position
can you
require-
limit their, with any approvals? I believe you can say that they cannot cut down trees without prior written approval, correct?
I think that if it's not in the application, I think we can certainly, or not in the draft document that we have now, I think we can certainly say that. I'm not gonna require a survey of every tree on this property because I don't think that's reasonable. But if you wanna,
I'd like for a condition of approval to prevent the removal of any trees without public notice, adequate time to review and reply.
Tom, just to be
Well-
clear, we're not proposing the removal of a single tree as part of this land use application.
Perfect.
I
So that
totally-
limiting condition seems acceptable to you, and that sounds great.
Mark, I totally agree. I have a text here that I got from Craig Slater. And Craig's comment about the tree, the quote unquote tree removal up by the barn. He says, 2 trees fell in the river and hit their and our property. We cleaned it up. That's his response to me.
right, well,
He-
I wanna interrupt this discussion right now because I don't want this to degenerate into a debate about what happened years ago in connection with the prior development on this property. I can't do anything about that one way or another.
I
So
understand.
both parties, you can reserve your comments for discussion between yourselves, which would be the first and best thing.
Agreed.
And if that doesn't work, perhaps the county enforcement, people can be asked to look into this, okay?
No,
But I'm not
I
gonna,
agree.
I'm not gonna referee this debate about the trees.
Yeah,
As far as the current application is concerned, I think it's fine if it says there's no authorization for removal of any trees without prior approval, okay?
absolutely.
All right.
Mr. Smith,
Yes,
I do have one more hand raised from a Mr. Craig Slater.
okay, identify yourself again, please, because it's hard to differentiate the voices here.
Can you hear me? I'm having a heck of a time. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we're getting a lot of feedback, so if you're on your phone, you may want to turn your computer down, or if you're on your computer.
No,
you
I'm
may
on.
wanna-
Is that better?
Seems to be.
We're still getting
Okay.
feedback.
How about now?
That's better.
Okay. I just want to say, in terms of, and I'm Megan's dad. And, in terms of the barn, we've had 3 events there. We have 2 daughters and one had the oldest one had a
Craig,
pre-wedding party.
this is Tom.
Yes.
This is Tom. Let me interrupt you. I'll let you comment, but make it quick, please, because I cannot get into past history on this, all right?
Yeah, no, I was just trying to make our neighbors feel better. We want to be good neighbors, and I'm not going to cut
Well,
any
you can
trees
talk
down.
to them. Talk to
Yes,
one
no,
another.
I-
I think that's what's called for.
Yep, Tom, that's great. And I'll be happy to share my, I just didn't know who to talk to. But we want to be good neighbors, and they don't need to worry about trees disappearing or going down. There was some massive trees that went down, and I think that's what they're talking about on their property. They just fell because of the river. But I want to be a good neighbor, and we'll work with them on anything they want. That's
Okay. Now, I have some questions, and this is for Tammy, if you can answer. If not, I'll defer to Alan. First, as we all know, there's a number of prior approvals associated with this property. Exhibit 5 is a hearing officer determination from 2004 approving a caretaker dwelling unit. Is that going to be built or not?
No,
All right.
no,
Because
that's
if it
long
were,
gone.
that would affect. All right, I have not seen any reference in the proposed hearing officer determination or anything else that's going away, and I think it would be good for anyone looking at this, the history of this development on this property in the future to know that that's going away. So why don't we add that as a provision of this hearing officer determination, okay?
Sounds good.
Just for clarity's sake. Now, there was also I believe, a site plan approved in 2017 in connection with the approval for the barn and the pond. And what if anything should be said, then there are conditions in that approval, what if anything should be said here about the relationship between the conditions of that prior approval and prior site plan and this application? I don't want there to be any question about ongoing compliance with conditions or the relationship between the site plan that will result from the approval of this application and the prior site plan. So, Tammy, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, we could make a clarifying condition that those conditions are still in effect. I don't think much has changed. I mean, they still have to abide by that agricultural, the deed restriction and those agricultural standards.
So is the envelope that was approved in connection with that application, is that going to remain as part of the approved development or activity envelope on this property, or does that go away, or what are we dealing with there?
No, they've shown it, appropriately shown it, if I can bring it up here, that activity envelope is still in effect. Sorry.
And it will not go away, it's not modified by this application, is that right?
It is modified by this application. We've shrunk the envelope in that area. The original envelope included the land where the barn was built and all of the
Right.
land below it into the meadow. And we're trying to eliminate that part of the envelope so that the
Fine.
meadow stays undeveloped.
I'd like to see a statement in here that indicates that the site plan approved by this application will supersede and replace the prior approved site plan.
Yeah, the
Okay,
conditions
is that-
should stay in effect, but this site plan.
Right, the
supersedes
site
it.
plan itself changes, but the conditions remain in effect, okay?
Yes,
All right. Now, CDU, what about there was a prior approval by agreement with the county that had a number of conditions in it. One of them was 15,000 square feet of development. That goes away, is that right?
that expired in 2006, Tom. It was a 5-year right and it was never acted on. The
Okay.
owner at that time made concessions to the county. They granted the right of way to Snowmass Creek Road to the county, and the county has that, but the approval has gone away. It expired in 2006.
So my concern on that is the continuing viability of other terms and conditions of that agreement. And I'm wondering what we should say about that. I understand that if the vested right for 15,000 square feet expired, that's self-effectuating, but what about other conditions in that agreement?
I don't know that the
Such
applicant.
as,
Go ahead.
go ahead,
No, you please.
such as what you just mentioned, okay?
Well, the Snowmass Creek Road was granted in fee simple to the county. So that's done.
Okay, is there anything else in there that,
My recollection is
involves
that
any-
that was the deal. I was personally involved with that, with Gideon Kaufman for
Okay.
a prior owner. And the only thing that the owner got out of the deal was the 15,000 square foot right. And that was sold to a new owner, and that new owner didn't use the right. And ultimately that new owner sold the property to the Slater family, who, when they bought it, did not have that right. So there was
Okay.
nothing that carried forward from that 2006 agreement.
So my last question along these lines has to do with the 1981 plat. Among other things, the 1981 plat included a recreation easement, which I have not seen any reference to in connection with this application, but I assume will remain in effect. What do we need to say here about the 1981 plat?
The only aspect of the 1981 plat that's being altered here is the envelope which was designated on that plat. In all other, we're not asking for a subdivision amendment or anything of that nature. So from my mind, the subdivision plat survives this and is certainly that recreation easement was granted 40+ years ago by Jareen Beers and her husband Irving. And that's a part of history. That's
I mean, if it helps, we can add that easement onto this activity envelope, but like Alan says, if it's on that plat, it's holding. So, you're binding.
Looks like Tom lost his phone line, so hang on.
yeah, I'm hearing you. I'm just looking on the site plan to see if Rodney referenced that on the site plan. And if he didn't, then maybe we should reference it on the site plan as a note. Just like you would reference any other recorded document. Does that make any sense, Suzanne, Tammy?
Yeah, we definitely can add that reception number in and make a note on this recorded activity envelope.
Yeah, because it was obviously granted 40 years ago. It's a matter of the public record.
Yeah, I don't see it. It's
I'm
not,
not seeing it either,
yeah.
which is unusual for Rodney not to catch that. But we can add it. I don't have any problem adding it because it was granted. I assume it was a fisherman's easement in Snowmass Creek.
No. Exploring key. I think so, yeah, marked one on the asphalt. Express written.
I think we're still trying to get Tom back with
I see
audio,
Tom's
so
coming back. Yeah, I don't see it on here.
Suzanne, I have, is his number 16282120456?
sorry, I have 379-7101 or 718-2044. Maybe try that second
There we
number.
go.
Hello?
Aha,
Hi, Tom.
I'm back on. I don't know what happened. Everything just, all my audio shut down. So now here I am. I called back in. Sorry once again. This is amateurish and I apologize.
were you able to hear any of our conversation?
No, not the last several minutes, but
What I suggested is if it does not appear to show on the site plan we're proposing to record. So I would propose to add to the site plan the citation for the recorded document that grants the recreation easement on the.
yeah, I didn't know. That's fine. If there is a recorded easement, then I'm good with it. I couldn't tell from what I read whether the easement was just on the plat or if there was also a recorded easement. If there's a recorded easement, that covers it.
Yeah, you and I have both been through a lot of documents that were created here in the 70s and 80s. And oftentimes they put notes on plats and they didn't write written easement documents.
Correct.
To accompany them the way we do now. And I'm not going to be at all surprised if the only reference to it is on the plat. So,
All right. Well, let's do that. Okay.
Yeah, that way there'll be no doubt that easement exists.
Yeah. Right. So basically, I just want to make sure that as far as all the prior approval are concerned, we're not breaking any chain of continuity that may be appropriate in connection with this application.
Right, and that's not our intent here.
Okay. So, is there anybody who wants to make any additional comments at this point before I close the public comment portion of the hearing?
Looks like you got a couple raised hands.
Okay, they don't, I got two, and let's see, unfortunately, let's see what it says here. Mark is top of my list here. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I want to clarify, is the building envelope being proposed to be changed as part of this application? And if so, could you bring it up on the screen and thoroughly explain the proposed change, expansion, reduction, or relocation of the building envelope?
Sure.
Yeah.
Alan's got that, and as far as I understand it, it's a substantial reduction of the previously approved
I'll bring
building
it.
envelope.
Hold on.
Want to bring it up, Tammy?
Yep. So. Um, ah. So, I don't know if you're familiar with the previous building envelope, but previously it was more or less this whole upper bank, this middle bank.
Yep.
Of the meadow where the cursor is.
That's right.
And so what they're proposing now,
It went as far as the well, Tammy.
okay,
It just
So-
barely encompassed the well.
yeah, so this was the
All that.
where the cursor is, and it went up around in this area. And so what they're proposing now is to do two envelopes, essentially, this barn envelope here where the cursor is, and then the envelope for the new residence and driveway, as well as they've called out the utility envelope, which Alan, like Alan said, was just for the buried septic system, so.
Thank you. That's helpful. So I have a couple of quick questions, if I may. Number one, regarding the barn envelope, am I clear that I've heard today that there's not an application to and no intention to add any dwelling or habitational occupation in the barn envelope?
Correct.
None whatsoever.
Correct.
Thank you. The utility envelope, that's strictly for underground utilities. Is that accurate?
Correct.
So the envelope for the home, which I think Tammy just circled with her cursor, thank you. That envelope there, is there a reason why the envelope has to extend so far over toward the, I'm gonna call it the northeast there?
Here.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember what the thought was there. in
because it's
including-
substantially larger than where that, I assume that the gray, dark gray is showing the proposed building envelope itself as it
That's
currently.
the building footprint, yes.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, why does the building, or I guess what you're calling the activity envelope, have to extend so far up the hill there?
You're talking about into what's shown as in green on this map?
Yeah, the green and also the non-green. I mean, why does it have to extend so far up?
Well,
Yeah.
bear in mind, all this covers an activity envelope designates the location for any and all changes to the use of the land. So that would include places where you can put a lawn, places where you can put, out any sort of outdoor structure or temporary or permanent that changes the use of that land. So,
Thank you.
Alan, if you want to go
Alan, are
further,
you representing the applicant?
me?
No, I'm sorry, Alan. Is Alan representing the applicant? Is that?
Yes, Alan's got speaks for the applicant, and I'll let him provide detail, but that's in general what the code requires.
So I think what's important to understand is that what's being proposed here is an activity envelope and a site plan. The activity envelope, as Tom said, is the area within which you're allowed to do grading or landscaping or any kinds of buildings. The site plan identifies precisely the improvements that are being asked to be approved here. So the only thing that we're getting authorization for here is what you see in front of you, with the one addition that Tammy showed of the greenhouse that sits behind the house. Craig reminds me that there's still the ability for them to come back at some point in the future and ask for other agricultural buildings. So they've not built out all of the agricultural space that they're allowed to. This property is allowed to build up to 4,000 square feet of agricultural space. And to date, they've only built 1,200 of that. So the envelope is basically anticipating that at some point in the future, there might be other plans, but this approval today is approving nothing but what you see in front of you.
Thank you.
We would have to
So,
come back.
so I understand. So is there a intention or plan to propose more agricultural buildings in the, what's, I think is called the barn envelope or something down there near the pond?
No, we actually shrunk the area around the barn envelope as much as we could. We basically brought it, as you can see, around what's already happened. And no, there is not really a plan right now to do any changes to that envelope. When I was drawing the shape that you see in front of you, I basically tapered it as much as I could to represent what's there today and nothing more.
Thank you. Is it possible for Tammy to bring up the site plan?
I mean, in essence, this is the site plan. You want more,
Well, is there a separate page that's called site plan?
no, this is what's gonna be recorded.
I'm sorry,
No,
it's so small, it's hard for me to read, but I thought it said site plan on a different page on the left.
Yeah, there are a number of them, Mark, and I mean, there's a utility plan that kind of focuses on the house area a little bit more. It's a couple of pages down, Tammy.
I'm less concerned about buried utilities, couldn't care less about those. What I care about is where future ag buildings can be built, where any future structures can be built at all.
If you look at this one, Mark, you start to see some of the grading that needs to happen that takes the envelope a little bit higher than just the footprint of the house. So, these kinds of drawings are in the application and they are helpful in describing why the envelope is proposed at the size that it is.
But Mark, let me just say that and I do not have in front of me a request for the approval of any structures other than those that are explicitly identified in this application.
Right.
And they would have to come back, even ag buildings, they would have to come back and ask for another approval.
I understand that. My point is, if you approve the envelope, that's where they can go, right?
The envelope is, the activity envelope is the location for any and all development, but you have to get a site plan approval to build within that activity envelope.
Got it.
So there can't be any structures other than those that are already identified without going back and asking for additional approval. In addition, they will have to address the FAR issue, floor area allotment, that would limit the scope of any additional development. Plus, you have zoning considerations that also come into play.
Got it. So other than grading, is there any reason why you couldn't limit development within this? I think it's called the activity envelope around the main house, and I think it's called utility envelope. Is there any reason why you couldn't limit that further? Because it's an awfully big envelope, and it's my impression the utility envelope could not have any future structures on it. Is that accurate?
We're not proposing any structures in the utility envelope. That's specifically why we called it out as a separate envelope, because we thought people would be concerned about the overall size of that envelope. I could have just called it an activity envelope and not had the line between the two, but the utility envelope is specifically for utilities. And yes, you're correct, no buildings are proposed.
Thank you. So that brings us down, my concern down to the building envelope, and I'm sorry, I just can't see the words, they're so small. But again, is there a reason why it has to extend so far up? It leads me to believe that, one could add cabins or something up on the upper side of the proposed building envelope where the grading is going to take place. And I'm not. I know there's none now. I know there's none now.
They can't put any, Mark, they can't put any additional structures on this property without getting a further approval.
I understand.
And whether or not
I understand
Okay,
that,
so
but
if-
I understand that, but if we limit the activity envelope now and they come back later to propose additional structures, I assume they'd be limited to proposing those new structures down the road within the activity envelope, correct?
They wouldn't be we're talking theoretically, we're projecting into the future here, which is pretty much hard to do, but they could always ask to increase the size of the activity envelope. So it doesn't really make any difference.
Okay, so you're saying they could enlarge the activity envelope later in order to add more buildings. So my question again comes back to the applicant. Is there any reason why, if we asked you to limit the activity envelope where it's enlarged to what appears to me to be the northeast, is there any reason why it has to be extend that far now, other than grading?
Well, it has to extend at least part of the way up there for the grading, yes.
Okay, but that's an awful long ways. I'm gonna guess that's a couple of 100 feet. Does it need to extend that far other than grading?
There's nothing proposed there
I heard that.
beyond the
Is there any
grading.
reason why the activity envelope has to extend that far now? I understand there's nothing proposed there now. I understand we'll have to come back for a meeting later. But I'm asking, is there any reason why the activity envelope couldn't voluntarily by the applicant be restricted on that end?
Yeah, I don't have authorization from my clients to shrink the envelope.
Okay, so to the committee or those in charge, I would ask that the activity envelope have some sort of limitation on that end, because I don't see any need for it to go all the way up there. And if down the road, they then apply for cabins or whatever up there, it's going to be very, very visible across the valley.
Mhm.
Looks like we lost Tom's phone line again.
Oh, no.
Alan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mark Polite speaking. I'd like to give my cell phone and email address, and if you would be kind enough to pass it on to the applicant, perhaps they could contact us separately so we could discuss some of our concerns.
Sure.
Thank you. The cell phone number is 415
Mm-hmm.
987
Yep,
8424.
got it.
And the email address, if you don't mind,
Yep, go ahead.
M as in Mark, B as in boy, P as in Peter,
Yep,
at Seagate, SEAGATE
yep.
PROP.com.
What was the part after Seagate?
Seagate Prop, or my company
Got
name
it.
is Seagate
Got
Property.
it.
So mbp@seagateprop.com. We would like to meet the applicant and talk about some of these concerns and find out if, if we're not successful in limiting this envelope, what their intentions are down the road or why they feel the need to retain it at that size, that location.
You know, you heard Craig say that he wants to be a good neighbor with you, and
Yeah,
I
and,
really
and,
wish,
and-
I
oh, I
wish
know.
we'd had the opportunity to talk about this before the hearing, because I think we could have worked out a lot of the issues that's normally the more productive way to get these things done than to try and argue them in front of the hearing officer. But
I understand, but I don't think good neighbor attitudes are limited to certain timeframes.
no, I agree.
Good.
No, I'm totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
He probably got those two contact by listening in, and if he didn't, I wrote them down. And we absolutely would be happy to talk to you, and, you know, you'll find Craig to be a very easy guy to get along with.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your
That's
facilitating.
just not that's not a problem at all.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm a neighbor of yours down the road too. I live in the Little Elk Creek subdivision. I've lived there for almost 30 years. I think I've probably run into some of you folks from time to time in the neighborhood. Yeah, it's not hard to be good neighbors.
Okay, Craig, you have your hand up. What would you like to say?
Yeah, Mark, can you guys hear me? I can't, I apologize.
Yeah,
for
I
all-
got you, and I assume
Okay.
everybody else does.
Okay, Mark, I'll be happy to talk to you. The reason, if I understand this correctly, we cannot even build cabins because we're at the maximum of what we can build here. There is room for additional agricultural buildings. We have no plan to do so. But I wouldn't want to shrink it because then I've got to, then the process, then my legal right is harder to achieve. But we have the legal right for, I think it's 4,800 square feet, and we've used 1,200 with the existing barn. But again, we have no current intentions to build anything but this. But I'd be happy to walk through it with you.
Yeah.
But that's why if we shrink it, I'm losing my legal right to a 2,800 square foot barn. And by the way, you know, if you look at it, I think you're winning here because I've given away the right to build that 2,800 where the 1,200 square foot barn is now because we've shrunk it. So the only logical place, if we ever did it, it would be up in this area where you're talking about.
Well, isn't it accurate that you could expand the 1,200-foot barn down in its current location to get up to your maximum?
Yes, I could. And that would be
Yes.
economic suicide. That would be economic suicide, but I could, I guess.
Well, you know, I'm not speaking economics. I'm speaking to
Yeah, I could make it
intrusion on our privacy, and that's the area that most intrudes on our privacy, and that's the area I'm most concerned about.
Yeah, we're done down there. I mean, I don't know how to tell you. It's,
So-
you know.
So if you're done down there, using your words, would you be willing to have some sort of limitation on future expansion just in that lower meadow envelope, whatever it's called, the barn envelope, or I'm sorry, I can't see it. I can't read it.
Yeah, Mark, if you were in my shoes, would you do that?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so let me, I'm going to interrupt. Hold on, hold on.
I would. I absolutely would.
I would like both of you to stop right now. Okay, I'm running this hearing. I've given you all a lot of leeway for this back and forth, which essentially is entirely inappropriate because the opportunity for back and forth is before or after the hearing, not in a public hearing that is for the purpose of considering whether this application complies with the Pickens County Land Use Code, not the individual preferences or not of that can occur and be discussed between the property owners. Okay, so I'm going to terminate this part of the discussion and ask if anyone has any other comments that go to the issue of whether or not this application is in compliance with the code. Is there anybody who wants to comment on that? If there are going to be voluntary agreements to further restrict development or not, that's beyond the scope of what I'm dealing with today.
Mr. Smith, we have a trust for the public who raised their hand.
Pardon me?
We have a trust for public that raised their hand and asked to comment.
Oh, trust for public land. I just saw that. And if whoever that is would identify themselves and make your comments, please.
Hi, my name is Cindy Cam. I am also one of the owners of the property across the way. And the reason the Trust for Public Land came up was because it was already clued into my iPad here. So I'm not operating as a representative of the Trust for Public Land. I am on the board for the Trust for Public Land and concerned about open space in general. But today I'm acting as a landowner from across the street. I'm wondering, and I apologize, I wasn't aware of this, so I came in late. Has there been any consideration or talk about this? My concern is where Mark Polite's concern is with the extended envelope twice the size of the building site. I'm wondering if there's been any talk or concern of how that affects the elk that are often there. And if we add more building there in the future, which is really the only reason I can see that they would want that super large site. And I know they have to go back for another permit. That's very clear. But to initially approve this one at such a large scale is concerning.
Okay, I appreciate that concern, and what I want to say is that it's been made, I think, abundantly clear that this application does not have anything to do with future development, which can be requested or not without regard to the size of the approved activity envelope here. I will tell you that based on my many years reviewing these applications, that this activity envelope, first of all, is dramatically reduced from what was previously approved. Number two, it is not unusual in terms of other applications that I have seen to have an activity envelope of these dimensions relative to the footprint of the buildings. It is common to have a larger activity envelope for non-impactive activities such as grading and clearing and landscaping and those sorts of things. So I think the appropriate time to object to future development is if and when it's going to occur. But I think their applicant is pretty much using up the FAR that they have available, and some of that concern in this case may be misplaced.
Okay, but the other aspect of it, has there been an evaluation done about the elk migration or the use of that area in particular that they're?
Well, the activity envelope dimensions aren't going to, the elk aren't going to know, okay?
Well,
elk aren't going to know where the activity envelope
The
is, so they'll
envelope
be there or
was,
not, regardless of the size of the building envelope.
the envelope was studied by our wildlife expert, and it was presented to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service, who approved both the site plan and the envelope. So yes, they are aware of the location and the extent of the envelope and the site plan. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been on this site multiple times and supports this location.
okay, and they support the size, the extra large size that is requested as well?
They did not ask for any changes to be made to the size of the envelope, or that would have been done already.
They asked for conditions, but for reduced impact on wildlife, and those are included in the conditions of approval.
There's a no dog requirement here. There's a no activity above the ditch requirement during a certain portion of the year. Those conditions were requested by Colorado Parks and Wildlife and are part of this approval.
And am I correct in assuming that the upper side of this building envelope does go right along the ditch that they suggested no activity?
Correct, but there's no activity proposed there. It just, you can't, if you put an envelope right around the footprint of a building, you don't give the construction folks any room to move their equipment. You don't allow for over digging or for grading or for landscaping or for any of the activities that normally happen. So as Tom said, we always draw the envelope with room around it. The drawing that we had up on the screen before, and it might have been before you joined the conversation, showed the grading that's necessary to build this project. And it does require grading going around the building and somewhat up towards where the top of this envelope is located.
I understand that. I understand that. My concern was just in line with Mark's that it is, if it is a place for future development because it's been approved already, then it does look directly down on us.
Understood. And
Okay,
we're not proposing it.
Okay, so thank you for clarification on that. I appreciate it.
Anything else? I'm gonna close the public comment portion of the hearing and, make my decision. And, did I hear somebody? My decision is to approve the application with the inclusion of the conditions that are contained in the proposed hearing officer determination that's in the packet, with the addition of, the conditions that I have asked for, or the findings that I have asked for regarding the relationship between this application and the prior development approvals for this property. In that regard, I would just like to comment that I understand the concerns of the neighbors for the development next door. It's not unusual to encounter this, but the fact of the matter is that this is an application that meets the requirements of the Pitkin County Land Use Code as far as I'm concerned, and those findings are contained in the hearing officer determination. If this property could have been developed in the past with an approval for 15,000 square feet of structure, and this application is a dramatic reduction in that previously approved floor area. In addition, while there's concern about the flexibility of this activity envelope, it is dramatically reduced from what was previously approved. So, it's my view that in terms of impacts on the surrounding area, this application represents a dramatic improvement from what was previously approved by Pitkin County, although those prior approvals were not acted upon. So, if there is dissatisfaction with this decision after it's signed, there's an opportunity for appeal to the Board of County Commissioners, and anyone who objects to the approval certainly has the right to take it up with the Board of County Commissioners if they feel the need to do so. So with that, I think we're done on this application for today. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and your patience. Again, I apologize for being technologically impaired, and I'm going to work on that from my end. All right.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
I need to have, we have another application to consider now. Hopefully I won't have a glitch on my end of the phone here. If I do and you don't hear me, I will redial, which I've had to do several times now. I don't know why they dropped the line. I need, I believe, to see as participants for this application Suzanne Wolf and who else do we have?
Mitch.
There's
Yeah,
Suzanne.
Tom, yeah, Mitch and I are both on. I think
Right,
everybody,
Mitch Haas,
everybody else.
and I don't see either one of you as identified as my, well, let's see here. Oh, now I've got you. I've got Bonnie,
Everybody-
Suzanne, Mitch, Gary Moore. Was Gary on the previous one?
Yeah, everybody else on there is from the previous item except Bonnie.
Okay. And anyone who wants to is free to attend and participate. So, with that, we'll turn to the second item the third item on the agenda, which is the application for amendment to hearing officer determination number 15-2004 for a retaining wall on property owned by 69 Sunshine Avenue LLC and Next to Hunter Creek LLC. We'll start by hearing from Suzanne, then I'll turn it over to you, Mitch. I don't know if you're anticipating anyone else on your behalf to comment on the application, but they're free to do so in connection with your presentation. And if I have questions, I'll ask as we proceed if necessary, otherwise at the end. So, Suzanne, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. I'll be quick since we did the site visit with you last week on September 7th. I think that gave you a pretty good sense of, you got to see the mural. We looked at it from Main Street in Aspen. But so just to backtrack a little bit, the request is to amend the hearing officer determination from 2004, which granted scenic overlay review approval for the driveway to 877 and 888 North Spruce Street. So essentially the retaining wall that the mural is located on is the retaining wall along that driveway to those two residences. The mural was installed on a site wall, which is basically what I've referred to in the memo as the second wall. On that site wall along the driveway, there was a notice of violation issued by the code enforcement officer that the site wall was not in compliance with the land use approvals and the issued permits, essentially based on the appearance, which representations were, natural colors, stone veneer, etc., and that the mural was not consistent with that. I'm not going to walk through all the history. It's all in my memo, and I think you've are familiar with that at this point. I think just quickly the pieces of after approval was granted for a boulder retaining wall. That's what was initially built. My understanding from going through permits is that that boulder wall either failed or was determined not to be adequate for the retaining needed. So at the time we issued a permit to stabilize or repair that wall by installing a soil nail wall. And that's essentially what you see the back wall, which is a shotcrete wall. My understanding in talking to staff is that the intent then was that boulders would be put back to face it to bring it back to the condition of a boulder retaining wall being the physical look. Again, that's in conversations with staff. I don't have documentation on that. But then in 2018, there was a permit issued to construct the 6-foot-high concrete wall in front of the soil retaining wall. And at that point, that was approved. And the representations made at the time were that there would be a stone veneer on that and landscaping planted in front of it, which would maintain consistency with the intent of the original condition for the retaining wall about having colors that blend with the natural surrounding environment, having the retaining wall look like and blend into the surroundings. So again, our position is that the mural that has gone in on that wall is not consistent with those representations. Sorry, I've lost part of my memo. The applicant had requested basically to find that this was exempt, that it was not, sorry, I guess I'll let Mitch talk to that part. To find that it was exempt from the scenic view protection criteria, as it was not discernible from Highway 82 by the naked eye. As we saw when we went out there last week, it is discernible. Totally agree. It's very far away. There's a large house next to it. There are other things that your eye might be drawn to, but you can definitely see that there's something that doesn't blend with everything else. And, it was, having seen the mural, it was clearly the black and white figures that show that don't blend with the surrounding area. So our recommendation in order to comply with the scenic view protection provisions, given that there is limited visual impact, is that the mural would remain if landscaping was installed to lessen the visibility of the mural. I'd suggested that that could include landscaping directly in front of the mural or downhill. I was out there years ago scrambling around on that hillside below the driveway and was concerned that it might be so steep, it might be difficult to place any landscaping in that area. I think Mitch can speak to that. But anyway, we were looking to find some mitigation to bring it more in compliance with those scenic view protection criteria. And that's it.
Mitch, please proceed. Do you hear me?
Sorry, I was
Am I
muted.
being heard or not?
Yes, I made that classic mistake of not unmuting.
I'm just glad it was you and not me who screwed up that time.
No, that one was on me. You're good. Thank you. And good evening if it's almost evening, I guess. So I didn't know, where to really go with this tonight. I don't want to, I could make a whole bunch of arguments and positions as to why this shouldn't apply and why we shouldn't have to do anything here. But the truth of the matter is we're fine with, I spoke with my client, he'd be willing to go ahead and install a bunch of evergreen trees on the downhill side of the driveway to fully screen the section of the wall that we were able to see. I consulted with Darla Calloway at Design Workshop, who did the original landscape plan, about the ability to plant some evergreen trees in that area. And she was confident it could be done with very little disturbance, at most a couple boulders to hold the root balls in place, but that's about it. And my client is willing to do that. I think we talked about, probably 5-6 spruce trees along the lower downhill side of that wall. All we were able to see at all from where we stood was the black and white section, the kind of, I guess they're, Egyptian looking soldiers up at the top end of the wall. And that section of the wall from the downhill side, we looked at it in a cross section. The wall's about 6 to 8 feet tall there. We would plant trees of between 12 and 16 feet tall. It would completely do the trick. My client's willing to do that. So if that's acceptable, then yeah, we're good with the recommended condition of approval. We appreciate how reasonable of an approach this is. I know, Suzanne could have recommended no, put the stone veneer over the whole wall, and then I'd be making much different arguments. And I have those arguments in the back of my head, but I'd rather not get into them if I don't need to. So I guess it kind of, for me, comes down to where you are on it, Tom, before I bother launching into anything.
Well, I don't want you to forego an opportunity to make comments that you might deem appropriate on an assumption that the recommendation of staff will be endorsed by me. So why don't you go ahead and say whatever else you would want to say.
Okay, well, so, my first position is, while we were able to pick out the wall from the one position in front of St. Mary's Church, I still believe, had we not stood in front of the wall 5 minutes earlier and had a close-up look at it, we would have stood in front of St. Mary saying, I don't know what I'm looking at. That there's something there, but I can't discern with my naked eye what it is. So my first point is I still believe it's not discernible from Main Street. The second point, I guess I would have to then put on the record, is that Main Street in Aspen is not within Pickens County scenic review jurisdiction. That the county's regulation of scenic review is from roads in unincorporated Pickens County, not areas within the city of Aspen or within the town of Snowmass Village. And in the city of Aspen, that is Main Street, not State Highway 82. This is consistent with a hearing officer finding from 2008 for a review up in Wildcat Vista that I was involved in, where the hearing officer found that the views from Owl Creek Road and Brush Creek Road start at the county line where it's in county unincorporated jurisdiction, and the portions visible from Brush Creek Road and Owl Creek Road within the town of Snowmass Village are irrelevant. And those were put in a staff memo as well as a hearing officer determination at the time. I don't want to undo scenic review as it stands. That is not my intention. So that's why I was trying to not bother with those types of arguments and just say, we're willing to go ahead and screen it because we're willing to go ahead and screen it. So that's sort of the gist of it. So yes, I do believe, technically speaking, this is exempt from scenic review. One, because I do not believe it's discernible, and two, it would have to be discernible with the naked eye from those portions of Highway 82 that are unincorporated Pitkin County. And from those areas, it's simply too far, and the angle of repose is simply too difficult. You just don't see the property. Again, like I said, we're willing to go ahead and install the landscaping to screen it.
Okay.
And if you want me, I could pull
Suzanne,
up those old approvals in 2008
No,
stuff, because I
I've
finally
seen
found
the
it in my
approvals.
files, but it's there.
I've read the application and staff report. And Suzanne, do you have anything further you would like to say?
I guess to, you know,
Are
Mitch's point, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. You know, I'm not specifically familiar with the 2008 determination he mentioned. I think I'm only familiar with one other circumstance where I know that conversation came up about being outside of the county. And that was an issue, I think, in Eagle County, Highway 82 in Eagle County, looking back into Pitkin County. It is not a conversation I have had with our attorneys about the applicability of our scenic review standards. And we've certainly always used Main Street, you know, as Highway 82 through Aspen for, you know, scenic review for everything up on Red Mountain. So those are just my only thoughts on that.
I would just say, you know, if Tom decides he's okay with this condition of approval, then I don't need to or want to have that conversation either. But, you know,
Well,
like
I
you
think we're
suggested,
having
I should
it,
go ahead and
and
put it
if
on
you
the
want to
record.
say okay.
And the only issue I would have with that condition of approval is it gives us 30 days to apply for the permit. And I think realistically, just knowing people's time frames and schedules, we need a little more time than 30 days.
Okay, with that, I'll close the evidentiary portion of this hearing and go to the decision. And it is my decision to deny the applicant's request. I have drafted a hearing officer determination of denial, which I will sign and distribute to, or get to Suzanne, and Suzanne can get it to you, Mitch, with my signature on it. But I will give you now sort of a verbal summary of the reasons for my denial. The condition of original approval was in 2004, which was 17 years ago. At the time of the inclusion of condition number 3, which required a boulder wall faced with natural colors and or stone veneer wall, and then subsequent modifications to the work that did not change that fundamental condition, the applicant could have asserted at that time that the condition was unreasonable, that scenic foreground requirements should not apply for whatever reason, including those now mentioned, but that did not occur. Subsequently, the applicant came in for additional permits and could have, but did not ask for removal of the condition. In fact, the building permit that was eventually issued, the contractor specifically referred to stone veneer as being what was requested for approval. A veneer, of course, is what's on the outer surface of that wall, and what's on the outer surface of that wall is a mural and not what was required by the conditions of approval or what was represented in the application. After the initial approval in 2004, as I've mentioned, subsequent permits were issued without changing this condition. Without a request to change it either. And then subsequently, the mural was installed, and prior to the installation of the mural, independently of the previous permits, the applicant could have requested a change based on the desire to put the mural in place as opposed to what was previously required and previously promised by the applicant in connection with the development approvals of this property. The applicant has achieved all of the benefits of the development approval, and as anyone else, this applicant is responsible for compliance with the conditions of approval, which conditions were accepted by the applicant in connection with the approval. I am unpersuaded by the assertion that the applicants weren't aware that this was in violation of the scenic foreground requirements. Even if unaware specifically of those requirements, certainly the applicant is on notice of the requirements, either actually or implicitly, that the previous permits required, and this was done in direct violation of those conditions. The primary question for me in this hearing is not whether scenic view protection requirements are complied with or not. As I've said, the time to litigate that question has come and gone quite some time ago. The issue for me is section 2-20-150B of the code regarding the requirements for a minor amendment to development permit. It's my view that this application does not meet the requirements of subsection B1 and B5. B1 requires that the approval must be, quote, consistent with the action taken during previous development approvals, and this application is directly at odds with the previous development approvals. Second, subsection 5 states that it must not increase off-site impacts in the surrounding neighborhood, and the sight lines to this wall from the surrounding neighborhood are pretty obvious, and that there will be impacts there, which in my view supersedes any of the initial requirements for scenic foreground review that were at issue at the time that the application was being considered. In addition, I agree with Suzanne's comment that the mural can be seen, albeit minimally, from Highway 82, and I'm not going to argue or respond from a legal standpoint on the question of whether that's an appropriate place from which to view the property on Highway 82. It's county policy to do so, and I'm going to conform to that. And if there's an issue, that can be raised on appeal to the Board of County Commissioners should the applicant choose to take that course. So that's it. Basically, I don't think there's much excuse for what has happened in this case, and I don't think it's appropriate for me, where my jurisdiction is to act with limited discretion, to apply as strictly as possible the conditions of the code and the conditions of development approvals. And to the extent that there's something beyond the language of the code or beyond the language of the approvals that justifies the exercise of some broader discretion, that's a question of public policy that I will defer to the Board of County Commissioners on in the event that you choose to appeal this decision. So that's where I'm at, and we will get the.
Are we still allowed to ask a question or discuss? I mean, because my thinking is if we went with the staff condition of approval to put in the screening, then does that not address consistency with the prior approvals?
No.
By screening.
I've made my Mitch, I've considered your comments and the recommendation of the staff, and I've made my decision with those considerations in mind. Okay. And so that's it for today. The record is closed. The hearing is adjourned. Thank you both for your participation. So long.
Yeah. Guess we got an appeal coming.